Madam President, over the past 17 years, a lot has changed in the Senate. Back in 2006, we counted 2 future presidents in our ranks, Barack Obama and Joe Biden. The chairman of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate was the late Arlen Specter, back when he was a Republican. And I was the most junior member of that Judiciary Committee. Well, today I want to tell you about one thing that has not changed since those days, and that is the dedicated, diligent public service of a man who has stood by my side every step of the way. As I have gone from the Judiciary Committee's most junior chair to serving as chair of the committee. That man's name is Dan Swanson. Dan is the embodiment of wisdom, patience, kindness, dedication, and selfless public service. Sadly, this is his last week as general counsel for the Senate Judiciary Committee. While Dan would never say it himself, he's just too humble. The truth is, he's made an indelible mark on the history of this nation. For nearly 2 decades, Dan has been my go-to man in addressing our nation's most complicated and urgent challenges. In every one of those challenges, he's been guided by a love for the law and a belief that our government can and should help people. When you consider his background, you can understand. Dan is the son of 2 teachers, and you can see their influence on the way he engages with others. No matter the time of day, he always finds time to talk through the details of statutes and case precedent, often from memory, and never loses his temper or patience. And just about any young staffer on the Judiciary Committee will tell you, Dan is the best teacher and mentor you could ever hope for. Moreover, his integrity and intellect are respected by senators and staffers of both parties. He is remarkably consistent. Growing up, he was always calm and kind, and he always knew what he wanted to do. In fact, Dan's parents say he was just about 10 years old when he first told them he wanted to write laws when he grew up. While other kids are dreaming of being astronauts or athletes, Dan knew that his future was in the law. Years later, he pursued that dream by going to Harvard Law School because he thought it would help him land a job in the Senate Judiciary Committee. He then had the courage and determination to leave a well-paying job at a prestigious law firm and accept a job as a legislative correspondent in my office. Within weeks of joining, we realized Dan Swanson was indispensable. And soon enough, we were directing the hardest assignments of all to his desk. No matter how complicated the topic, Dan would always master it quickly. Frankly, Dan's legislative legacy is too long to list in a single speech, but let me tell you about a few notable accomplishments. Dan is the mastermind behind what is known in banking circles as the dreaded Durbin Amendment, a financial reform that has saved consumers and retailers billions of dollars by setting limits on the so-called interchange fees, which banks charge merchants every time you swipe a debit card. Madam President, I had never heard of a swipe fee or an interchange fee, and I stumbled into a meeting of the Senate Judiciary Committee presided over by then Chairman Arlen Specter, where he described a process where retailers across America were forced into signing agreements with the major banks and credit card companies, Visa and MasterCard, agreements which many times they never even had a chance to read. It was a take it or leave it proposition, and in many ways it still is. The notion is if you want to run a restaurant or a shop or a chain of stores and you want to use Visa and MasterCard for your customers, you have to pay what they demand, the so-called interchange or swipe fee. It turns out for most of these retailers, it's their 3rd most expensive item of business. The labor cost, of course, and of course, the basics of food in a restaurant are the supplies that are needed in stores. The 3rd most expensive thing which retailers face day in and day out are these interchange fees or swipe fees charged by the big banks and the big credit card companies. Can you imagine taking on that industry and trying to force through reform. I couldn't do it. Well, I couldn't do it without him. Dan Swanson understood it. He reached the point where he mastered that particular area of the law to the point where we offered a change in the way we do business in America when it comes to debit cards. It was a long process. We had to offer an amendment on the floor in the banking reform bill. And Dan, every step of the way, was my guide as to what we could achieve. We changed the law, and we reduced the costs to the retailers and to merchants and restaurateurs of using those debit cards for that purpose. I don't have many friends in the big banking industry as a result of it, but I can tell you we made the big banks pay $8 billion a year that they otherwise would have collected in these swipe fees. And by not collecting them, consumers and retailers were the winners. My lead advocate in that area, my expert in that area, was Dan Swanson. He understood it, and he did it so well. He also helped save countless lives from gun violence, a topic on which he has been my top advisor. Just last year, he joined the group that wrote the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the most important gun safety reform to pass Congress in nearly 30 years. And Dan Swanson has also been my point person on federal judicial nominees for my state of Illinois. He even helped create the bipartisan process we use in our state to select candidates to recommend for presidential judicial nominations. Dan has overseen the confirmation process for all but 2 of the federal judges currently serving in the entire state of Illinois. And the judges he has helped reach the federal bench bring not only strong credentials and experience, they have brought vital new perspectives. With Dan's help, the Senate has confirmed the first women to serve as judges in the Central and Southern districts of Illinois, the first Black and Asian American judges to serve in those districts, as well as the Seventh Circuit. And he was instrumental in the confirmation of the first African American woman on the U.S. Supreme Court, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. Throughout his more than 17 years of service in my office, Dan has not only changed America for the better, he's also experienced some changes of his own. Dan does not like to be in the spotlight, but 10 years ago, I love this story, he and his wife Priya made a splash in the Washington Post. They were on their way to the hospital for the birth of their second child, but they didn't make it in time. Little Arya was born in her parents' car. She arrived a few years after her big sister Maya, who was born in a more traditional circumstance. So while our team regrets losing Dan, I know there are 2 little girls, along with their mom, who are going to enjoy a summer of quality time with Dad, which is just around the corner. I hope the 4 of them have a chance to head up to Vermont soon with Dan's parents, Ellen and Donna, as well as his brother, Allie, to take long walks in nature, watch the Bronx Bombers play, and enjoy countless helpings of Dan's favorite Jell-O and pie. A writer I admire once observed, and I quote, "With the lives that we live and the choices we make, let our goal be to give the world more than we take." Dan, you've given everything you can possibly give to public service, and I have been the beneficiary. I am grateful. America is grateful. Thanks, Dan Swanson. Madam President, I yield the floor.